difficult to employ people who are already skilled in these trades, so we have to train our own apprentices in the yard.
Boat building is not the only old trade still alive in Macduff. The Seaway Net Company now occupies what used to be the railway station, perched on the hill overlooking the harbour. Here they also still rely on traditional skills to keep the company's high position in a very competitive market. Jim McPherson, you're the manager of the Seaway Net Making Company. Now, how much work is done by machine and how much is done by hand?
All our sheet netting is bought in from various companies in sheet form. Then we cut it out by hand, and the whole net is put together by hand. There's a lot of work done using shuttles and needles, hand splicing, lashing on ropes, etc. You could go on and on. Basically, the whole net is done by hand after we buy the sheets in.
Why not use a machine?
There's no machine yet devised that can make a trawl from start to finish. All the nets are made to individual requirements. Every skipper has his own ideas to be put into a net, and we just a combination of between our own ideas and what the skipper wants.
How long do they last then?
A net could last anything from roughly about a year to 2 years, unless he loses it before that.
What do you say the price of a net? You know, I was looking at some of these. That's a big net there. How much does that cost?
That one there is what we call as a 213 feet pair trawl, and that would cost about 5,300 roughly.
A lot of money, isn't it?
Yes.
How long does it take to make?
That type there, it takes about 120 hours, 120 man-hours to make that one there.
Today?
Yeah.
How big is the demand?
Demand, we can't cope with demand. We've never got time to do anything else but to make for order. There's a high demand just now.
Do you find local labour?
Yes, all local labour, yes.
Things look bright for you then?
Very good, yes.
Thanks for talking to us, Jim.
OK, thank you very much.
Now we turn from traditional industries to the start of a legend which gave Scotland a great folk hero and one of its most popular songs. Here to tell us more is a very special guest who herself has fond memories of a childhood spent on the east coast of Scotland, Hannah Gordon. Right, Hannah, where do we start?
On the 16th of November, 1700, a cold afternoon.
Just like today.
Just like today. And it was that afternoon that James McPherson was hanged on the public gallows in Banff. He was the illegitimate son of a wild gypsy woman, but his father, who was the Laird of Inverbereshie, ensured that James was well educated, and in particular he became a very accomplished fiddle player and a very fine swordsman.
He didn't really have a exactly trouble-free existence, did he?
No, he didn't. When he was still quite a young man, his father was murdered, and he avenged his death in a duel and killed the other man. And it wasn't long after that that a rumour began to spread that his mother, who was the gypsy woman, was in fact a witch. And her house was burnt to the ground, in fact razed to the ground.
And that's when his life as a real outlaw began, then?
But to avenge the crimes committed against his mother, James formed a gang with a few friends, and it became the scourge of the countryside, driving off livestock, raiding farms. And he soon became known as Banffshire's Robin Hood because he gave away a lot of his booty to the poor. But eventually, after a lot of escapades and a lot of escapes, he was actually captured finally at Keith and sentenced to death. His last request as he climbed the steps was to play to the waiting crowd a fiddle lament that he'd composed in his prison cell the night before.
And it's the final last few minutes of his life that were so extraordinary, weren't they?
Yes, because having played his farewell, he then broke the fiddle over his knee and mounted the scaffold. At that very moment, however, a horseman was riding at full speed from neighbouring Macduff with a reprieve. But the Banff magistrates weren't going to be cheated on this occasion because he'd escaped their clutches too often in the past. So as the rumour of the reprieve began to filter through the crowds, they simply moved the hands of the clock forward 15 minutes to the appointed time of the execution, and he was in fact hanged. It's said that the citizens of Macduff were so incensed by this disregard for the law that when the Doon Kirk clock tower was built, the side facing Banff was kept blank, so that the inhabitants there would never know the correct time. Well, how much of the story is true and how much has been embellished over the years, we don't know. But James's story will live on because of the lament which he composed the night before in his prison cell.
And he, no doubt, would have been delighted to know that it was Robert Burns who later added words to it and so created Macpherson's Farewell. And here to sing it for us now is Dougie MacLean.